Hey, Pulse Nation, Richard Garner here, host of a Third Way podcast and regular contributor here at the Pulse on all things media. Sitting in again for our fearless leader who is away on a well-deserved break, Joe Martino. When last we left our pandemic prophet, Bill Gates, a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about his redemption tour and what that was all about, we mentioned the fact that there was obviously an objective here. It was to slowly reintegrate him into public prominence. Yes, asking him a few tough questions about Jeffrey Epstein or his workplace dalliances while at Microsoft, his inappropriate workplace behavior, but quickly shifting or pivoting to Bill Gates, the author, the expert on virology, epidemiology, and all things pandemic. Well, unfortunately, what we feared most is happening now, that in fact, not only has he been returned to public prominence and authority on all things global health, he's now sort of transcended even being asked tough questions about Epstein or anything else, as evidenced here by his appearance on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah.
Please welcome Bill Gates. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So everyone gets $1 million, yeah? I mean, you hear the cheers.
Maybe a book.
Maybe a book? Wow. Wow.
Does that feel like the appropriate response for somebody who's been tied to a convicted sex offender? Can you imagine anybody else with that connection to Jeffrey Epstein walking on to The Daily Show to rousing applause, laughter, backslapping with the host Trevor Noah? Does that make any sense to you?
A lot of people have asked this question, I mean, through the pandemic. Don't get me wrong, there were crazy takes, but some people asked what, in my opinion, was a valid question. They said, well, why is Bill Gates the one who's talking about this? I mean, if we want help with computers, we know we're going to call you, but why are you the person who's writing books about a pandemic or talking about a pandemic? Is it because you're a billionaire, or what gives you that right?
Yeah, my full-time job is at the foundation now, and we work on infectious diseases all the time. And pandemics, you have to have people who know about vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics and communications. Well, I was lucky enough for the last 2 years as we put an extra $2 billion into trying to stop this pandemic, that I was listening to them and understanding, okay, we should have done this, we should have done that. So there's amazing experts that I love working with. There's no one who kind of could make it simple. And so my goal, like with my climate book, was to elucidate it in a way that would be quite straightforward.
I see. So you talk to the experts, and then you go like, you guys speak gibberish. I'm going to write it down in a way that people can understand. It makes sense.
Does it, Trevor? Does it make sense? So let me process this for a second. Bill Gates, when asked, why should people take you seriously just because you're a wealthy guy who built a tech company? Why should you be considered the world's de facto expert on all things vaccines and epidemiology, et cetera, world health in general, simply because you started a foundation? Arguably, Trevor Noah's closest thing to a real question. But what response does he get and let go unchallenged? Bill Gates says that, because he's surrounded by all these experts, and these experts aren't great at connecting with people and being able to sort of dumb down all their complex science talk, Bill Gates is the person to, in his word, elucidate. Imagine a guy explaining how he's the king of making things more accessible, uses the word elucidate. A guy known for being a tech geek who has a very difficult time with connection with people in general, couldn't look less warm, and isn't great at being able to boil things down, especially when talking about tech. Yes, Bill, you're the perfect person to be able to go out and take this message to the people. Great job, Trevor. Way to challenge him. But if you thought that was bad, get a load of this.
That's a big thing that you've been an advocate of, is creating a fairer system of getting technology and resources out to the world. I mean, you were one of the first people who complained about vaccines not going to Africa and not getting it out to the people who needed it.
What? That is exactly the opposite of what happened. Bill Gates famously or infamously went on another media tour to help sell the message of not releasing the patents to developing countries at the time. So much backlash, in fact, that here's some publications that called him out for this level of hypocrisy. And imagine things like the New Republic literally portrayed him as the devil. This is a very respected liberal media source. This is how much outrage there was for this double speak, that he was all for, these important vaccines had to be everywhere in the world. But we're not going to push the pharma companies to release the patents so these developing nations could also get vaccinated. Obviously seemed like a contradiction, or 2 + 2 = 5. The backlash was so bad, in fact, that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually ended up having to revise the position, and then went on to support like temporarily releasing the patents. But Trevor Noah sets it up like he's actually the person out there who was, advocating on behalf of developing countries when it came to vaccines. It couldn't be further from the truth. This is the point of contention for me and confusion, because you might think, well, you're seeing this through the lens of the current left-right media paradigm where everything's polarized and everything's divided, and then think to yourself, well, this is just classic left-right stuff. But the truth of the matter isn't, if you're in your 20s and 30s, you don't remember the Bill Gates years of the 80s and the 90s, where he was universally reviled, especially by the left, because of his tyrannical, despotic, monopolistic business practices and tyrannical behavior as the head of Microsoft. This was not a well-liked guy. In fact, quite the opposite. And of course, we know the story. Then he leaves or is pushed out of Microsoft, goes away for a couple of years, gets a makeover, sweaters, new glasses, launches a foundation, and of course, the rest is history, as they say. But it wasn't just the recent behavior of Bill Gates and the behavior at Microsoft back in the day. Even the foundation came under major scrutiny by really good journalists, again, almost exclusively and predominantly left-leaning liberal establishments like Mother Jones, The Nation, etc., because they saw a guy that, regardless of his PR performance, had not changed how he carried himself, how he ran the foundation, essentially exactly like he ran Microsoft. So here's a few of the headlines. Bill Gates' charity paradox. A Nation investigation illustrates the moral hazards surrounding the Gates Foundation's $50 billion charitable enterprise. And this was, again, it goes back, even to the early, 2010s, 11, 12, 13s, where this story started to change from, isn't this a fantastic story of philanthropy, of giving away billions and billions of dollars, of helping people in developing countries and poor children, et cetera, to now the data and the feedback was coming back from these countries, coming back from organizations like Doctors Without Borders, and it wasn't good. They were talking about he was ruling with an iron fist. It was their way or the highway. And they were using their buying power as a foundation to not only profit off their investment in vaccines and other global health innovations, but they were dictating the terms of absolutely everything. If you wanted to get funding for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you had to play ball. Here's another headline from Mother Jones. The Gates Foundation's hypocritical investments. ExxonMobil, Walmart, and McDonald's are just a few of the companies that the mega charity supports. Now, again, obviously, a lot of the talk about Gates and the foundation recently have been about vaccines, epidemiology, et cetera, pandemics, but he's also very active in the climate change, environmental space, as well as agriculture and the future of food. So this is, again, a demonstration of the talking out of one side of your mouth about being green, caring about the planet. And then, of course, when somebody actually looks at the books, they see that there's investments in companies like Exxon, et cetera. And finally, you might ask yourself, well, why isn't there more media coverage beyond these, well-established media outlets, certainly not big name, big brand media institutions? Why are we not seeing the same investigations out of the New York Times, out of the Washington Post, out of CNN, et cetera? Well, maybe it's because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was very conscious of, again, using that buying power to make sure that the messaging around them and the foundation was always positive. Well, how do you do that? Well, according to a very comprehensive and thorough, in-depth investigation by one of the most respected names out there for media analysis, the Columbia Journalism Review, they were very, very calculated in finding back-channel ways to fund various media organizations through endowments, through these, we have a fund over here separate from the editorial department that's just about funding the future of journalism, et cetera. So you see how these things all come together for a very calculated, very diabolical strategy as to how to be able to go out and essentially own the space of global health, dictate the terms going forward. And then when you get in trouble and maybe you're going to be, brought down, if you will, because of your indiscretions, well, lo and behold, you always have your friends, the mainstream media, to help prop you back up again and help you with that redemption tour. But there are people out there like Vandana Shiva. If you don't know who Vandana Shiva is, you should. This is a woman that was revered by everyone out there as one of the most respected and esteemed voices in the world, called the female Gandhi. She received the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for philanthropy in 1993. She's been featured prominently in documentaries about, social progress, about corporate malfeasance, etc. She's on the ground helping Indian farmers. This is a woman that is universally respected and revered. Before we get to Vandana Shiva, here's a little nugget of Bill Gates's recent redemption tour with none other than CNN's Fareed Zakaria. And listen to this little nugget he casually drops on stage at one of these conferences.
And then at that point, we didn't really understand the fatality rate. We didn't understand that it's a fairly low fatality rate and that it's a disease mainly of the elderly, kind of like flu is, although a bit different than that.
Pardon? Did you just say sort of like a flu, like casually, like a throwaway line? The same thing that if people even dared make that comparison a year or two ago, were canceled, were deplatformed, were ridiculed in the public square, etc., were demonetized. Hey, Joe, sound familiar? So again, not only does Fareed Zakaria not challenge Bill Gates on this, he pivots to this.
I want to pick up on one thing you talked about when you talking about starting the foundation and picking its focus, which I was always struck by as somebody who grew up in India, which is you made a very conscious decision, it seemed to me, to treat all human life as equally valuable, which is very, very unusual. I mean, when you look at the charitable giving around the world, there is almost all of it assumes, that spending much, on American life or British life or, Indian life is much more valuable. And you really adopted this global view that you were going to try and do the most good with the money, and the most good was defined by saving people's lives or extending their quality of life, no matter where they were born, no matter what their passport. Did that just strike you as the rational thing to do? Did you realize that it was pretty unusual?
Wow, again, just admirable journalism from Fareed Zakaria. I'll spare you the rest of this tongue bath as well. And we'll get to the only person, it seems, that you're going to see throughout this entire video with any degree of integrity, principles, scruples, if you will, the incomparable Vandana Shiva.
Bill Gates is actually continuing the work of Monsanto because Monsanto had so many movements, and we held a tribunal on Monsanto. A buyer bought up Monsanto, but when Bill Gates pours money into Africa for feeding the poor in Africa and preventing famine, What's he doing? He's pushing the failed green revolution. He's pushing chemicals, pushing GMOs, pushing patents. Bill Gates is trying very hard to shift the patenting issue now to digital. So you just take a genomic map and you say, my invention, you don't create a seed. Seed is self-organized, self-making, and evolution in continuity. Just by making a map, a genome, and you have no idea what the seed does. And this is something he's pushing very, very hard. My book records how he financed DivSeek. I've talked about how he's pirated seeds we have saved that tolerate salt and floods. And he says invention. This biopiracy is a bit like Columbus, where Columbus is supposed to have discovered America when he basically went as a pirate. Why do I call him today's Columbus? Because he's carving out new colonies. Software should have stayed open software.
So you say he has a strategy, a nefarious strategy, what you describe as philanthrocapitalism, is a nefarious enterprise. And so you're not saying he's using the wrong methods, he's pursuing a wrong goal with self-interest. You also attack Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, saying they're all linked together. I mean, this reeks a bit of conspiracy theory, doesn't it?
Well, government threw the BT aubergine of Monsanto out. Bill Gates resurrects it in Bangladesh. We rejected the golden rice for solving the problem of blindness. He finances it to continue through Philippines. So he's taking all the failed projects with the wrong thinking that life is like a word program and can be chopped and cut and pasted when it's an amazing complexity of self-organization. And scientists call it autopoiesis, self-organization, writing your own poetry. That's what life does. He is absolutely ignoring all of this new knowledge that new science is giving us and imposing a failed technology with a huge cost to the planet, only so there can be monopolies and people and farmers aren't free to have their seed.
Love Vandana Shiva. She always tells it like it is. I was fortunate enough to have about 45 minutes with her for an interview with the Third Way podcast about a year ago. She pulls no punches on everything from the philanthrocapitalist biopirate Bill Gates, gets further in depth on how he's seen in India and Africa and elsewhere. If you want to check it out, there's a link below. So there you have it, folks. Glass half full, Vandana Shiva. Glass half empty, Trevor Noah, Establishment Media, Fareed Zakaria. The list goes on and on. The redemption tour of somebody that, quite frankly, not only doesn't deserve redemption, and I believe me, I believe in second chances. This isn't what this is about. This is somebody who's being quite hypocritically elevated, re-elevated, resurrected, if you will, to his position as pandemic prophet without having to answer to any of the very concerning allegations about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in a real way, with his life at Microsoft, his life as the head of Microsoft and workplace inappropriate behavior, etc. All of that, that's gone. He has been officially redeemed by legacy media, and now he is able to go out and speak unfettered by the inconvenient truths about future pandemics and how to stop them. That's what you call a PR exercise par excellence, again, brought to you by people at the mainstream media. But I will focus on the positive. There are people out there, as we saw at Mother Jones, The Nation, Columbia Journalism Review, Vandana Shiva. There are people still out there like Joe Martino and everybody here at The Pulse who are doing their best to continue to move forward and shine a light on the truth. And of course, it's going to be a bigger uphill battle these days, as there are so many different things out there designed to distract and to deceive. But we'll do our best here at The Pulse to try to focus on the positive and keep bringing you truth as much as possible, regardless of what the mainstream media is trying to do to resurrect the likes of Bill Gates.